la famille.
Hello everyone, thanks for having me here. So I'm Guillaume Cabane. I'm going to talk today about intent-driven automation. So I saw there's a lot of people in growth, so if you have more questions, I can unskip like half of the slides that I skipped because like they're like too in the details. So if you have lots of questions, bring the questions at the end. No problem about that. So I'm Guillaume Cabane, you can call me G. That's because Americans can't pronounce Guillaume, but here in Berlin, I know you have no problem with that. I'm the VP of Growth at Drift. I'm advisor at Segment, and I've been doing B2B online stuff, B2B SaaS for the past 15 years now. And it's actually this year, it's my 20th anniversary of doing stuff online. And I'm still not a billionaire, so I fucked up somewhere, but I'm working on it. So if you have tips, come to me, I'm interested. And so today I'm going to talk about a few things. I'm going to talk about the successful experiments that I created with the team at Segment in B2B SaaS growth. But I wanted to go further. I wanted to talk about the systematic approach I have to growth, the problem I'm trying to solve, and more than that, the vision I have for the future. If that doesn't make any sense, tell me. And the problem I'm trying to solve is that people, they come to me and say, Guillaume, you hate salespeople. You want to automate them. You must hate them. And if it's a salesperson, they hate me. I said, not true. I married a saleswoman, right? And I actually listened to her a lot. And you know what? She's an amazing salesperson, right? And when I saw her sell, what does she do? What does great salespeople do? Right? If you look at an organization in your company, if you have sales folks, and look at them, some salespeople sell way better than others, even with like random leads. Right? Some of them do. Why is that? Right? If the leads are random, what do they do? What's their trick? What's their secret? Right? And if you look at their methodology of selling, they ask questions. They try to understand the customer. They try to create trust or connection. Once they have that information, they're going to adapt their pitch. They're going to personalize it. Right? They're going to make their story better, more relevant for the user. They might even change the price if they're allowed to. Right? And this illustration is a very bad illustration because actually in The Wolf of Wall Street, he does not ask any question. Right? He just says how the pen is fantastic, how the pen is smooth, how the pen is thick. Does not ask questions. Right? Real good salespeople, they will know everything about you before trying to close the sale. Right? So that's what they do. What do we do in marketing? We do the exact opposite. Right? In marketing, we come up with one message and we slap it in the face of all the potential customers hoping it's going to work. Does it work? Well, not really. That's why we have like 10% conversion rates, right? Which means like 9 out of 10 people come to your website and they leave. And you might tell me, well, yeah, but that's because I've got the wrong audience. It's not the right people who are coming. Well, okay, unless you are like Reddit or Facebook, do you really think people are coming to your website just to like spend 2 hours because they have nothing to do? No, right? They come to your website because they've got a problem in mind. They have got a pain. They want to solve something, and they're not finding it, so they leave, right? And that's the issue we have in marketing, is that we don't have the data, so we don't personalize, so we don't close, and people leave. And we're just in that game of trying to just pour more and more and more leads on the top of the funnel. And most of the companies I advise or I talk to, their funnel is super leaky. It leaks from everywhere. People leave it all throughout the funnel. So the flip side of the coin is, why don't we put salespeople on each deal, right? Especially on B2B. You could say, well, you know, we could just like put a sales rep behind each contact and have them do it manually. It doesn't really work from a unit economics perspective. You know, if you look at the conversion to paid per company size, that's a pretty typical curve of conversion to paid in B2B SaaS, right? It's like really low for small companies. They don't have the means to pay. It shoots up and then it goes back down because the bigger the company is, the harder it is to close. There's more competition on the deal and so on and so on. If you look at the average contract value, well, of course, it just goes up linearly with like the company size, right? The bigger the company is, the higher you're going to charge them, especially in B2B. Now, if you multiply one by the other, and if you take into account the time it takes to close, you got a metric which is called the sales velocity. If you don't know that metric in B2B SaaS, please use it, right? So sales velocity, it's number of leads when you look at sales rep, or just deal size per conversion rate divided by the conversion time. It's basically a metric of how much money are you making per minute, per unit of time, right? And now if you trend that, you've got sales velocity in blue here, and you see it basically increases with the size of the company. But if you overlay the cost of sales rep, well, sometimes on smaller deals, it's not efficient. You lose money by putting a human on those deals. Think about it that way. If you have a deal in B2B because you're a small company like mentioned, and you're selling like a $99 deal, and it takes 1 week of work for a human to close, you're losing money, right? Because you're paying your human more than $99 for a week. Well, that's about the chart, right? And so it depends on your ACV. But basically, for a lot of the big part of the market, it's not efficient to put a sales rep. And if you think about what sales rep are doing, they are doing what we call ABM, account-based marketing, which is they spend a lot of time on large deals to collect a lot of data to close better, right? So they're data rich, it's very low volume, it takes a lot of time, and they do pretty good messaging. On the other end, because we cannot put humans, well, we automate, we do marketing automation. We have very little data, we don't close very well, but overall, because it costs nothing, it works out. The problem is that it's a pretty poor experience. It's pretty poor closing rates, and we could optimize that. And the basic idea is, can we create the experience of ABM without the cost of ABM? Can we scale that great experience downwards, right? And that's the problem I've been trying to solve for the past 3 or 4 years, which is creating a human-like experience, a personalized experience without the cost of having human. So let's look at how we did that ad segment. I'm going to give you 3-4 examples inside the funnel, right, where we have a lot of data. And then I'm going to go beyond that. So the framework I like to use is collect, enrich, score, and act, right? So you collect the data, you enrich it with third-party APIs, you score the leads, and then you automate the shit out of it. So let's look at the funnel, right? That's your typical funnel from like acquisition to conversion. You usually have a few points where it leaks a lot. It's the sign up, right? So it's activation and it's the sign up. And if you look at the activation part, starting at the bottom, that's usually where Go people start, you get the email address. With the email address, you can enrich and get a full profile of the person and the company. I'm going to show you 2 examples here. And before that, you get the IP address. And with the IP address, I can also show you how we personalize the website and the chat experience, right? So we collect data, we automate. Let's start with the bottom of the funnel where we have more data. This is a small GIF, there you go, it animates, of me signing up with my old email address from a small company on Segment's website. See the trick here, the form is pre-filled, right? I just entered my email address and it automatically fills my first name and last name. And it injects my company size, my role, my company name, and let's say a picture and a small tagline from Farid, right? And it's just social proof. That social proof is dynamic. That form was pre-filled. And when I validate that form, we confirm that we got the right profile from a third-party API. So what happens in between is that we pinged Clearbit, which is an API for enrichment, with the email address, and they send back the whole profile back. We force that in the form, and that creates a better experience. There's less effort, right? If you look at the results, we get about 30% more conversion rate on that form by pre-filling it, because we ask only the email upfront, and we get a ton of data when they validate it, right? We also have like the dynamic social proof. Now that's good. How do we use that for activation? Well, we use that rich data to improve the welcome emails and to split the path of people on the welcome emails. So this is the welcome email for marketers. And as you can see here, it's coming from me because I'm a marketer, so people can relate. So marketers get an email from a marketer. It makes sense, right? Just more relevant. And engineers get an email from engineers, right? And it makes more sense. And there's technical docs. When I joined Segment, everyone was getting the engineering email, right, with the technical docs. Well, obviously that was not working very well for marketers, right? And there's a lot more personalization happening here. We inject the company name and we use other sources I'm going to show you to collect more data. Now, the good thing about having a rich profile on the user is that you can create scoring models. Basically, you do machine learning to predict the value of a user to you. So you use past conversion data, all the traits you got on those users, and you create a model of who has a high likelihood of converting. And there's this company called MadKudu. They have an API that provides that prediction, right? And they return to me in about 200 milliseconds a prediction that is extremely good. This is the tree for the prediction, which is pretty simple. So it goes from the employee count to the metrics to the Google rank and so on and so on. It takes into account the 120 different traits, right? So you don't care a lot about that, but you will care about how well it performs, right? When we look at a prediction, they are able to predict 80% of the qualified opportunities, the qualified leads. You could think about the revenue within 16% of the signups, all right? So it means in 1/7 of our signups, we can maintain 80% of our revenue. It also means, what can we do with that information? We want to spend more time. We want to treat those people better, right? We know we can extract more revenue. If you think of sales velocity, those people, those 16% of the people, they've got 19 times the sales velocity in dollars per minute than the second category. Good, all right? So now what do we do with that information? Well, we change the email. That's the first thing, right? We have the welcome email come from the co-founder, and it's still automated, right? And the co-founder intros the sales rep who's going to be in charge of that account, saying, hey, I'm introing you to Payman Vedati. He's going to be in charge of you. Now, what happens in your company if the co-founder emails the customer, putting in copy a sales rep? What is that sales rep going to do? That sales rep is going to reply, right? That makes sense. Well, should we not do that automatically? Why wait for that person to do that behavior, right? So we automate the reply. And as you can see here, the original email is injected below. And so that creates a conversation thread. Now, if you put yourself in the shoes of the contact who's receiving that email, they get an email, a welcome email from the co-founder. They say, well, this is automated. And then they get a reply from the sales rep automatically. They think that's human because that's the normal behavior of a sales rep, right? So I'm creating the perception of humanity even though there's none. So the last thing we can do is here. I'm doing a sign up on the right hand with a larger company. In this case, it's Instacart, but you don't care. So Instacart signs up. Check out the difference here. I'm using the fact that I can predict in 200 milliseconds based with the email the outcome, and I change the experience. And the sign up now says, would you like help getting started? Because if you think of my email, my VIP path, the goal of that path is to say, hey, I want to talk to you, dear contact who's very valuable. Well, why wait for the email? I can do that in the sign up. And now all the people who click, I want help getting started, they automatically get a calendar that pops up and that say, oh, okay, select a time. And so we skip the whole email phase, right? So that worked well. So I showed you how we could use the email as a key to the enrichment to a rich profile, and using that profile to modify the marketing experience and give a better experience, right? It's fairly easy. It's pretty standard nowadays. The problem is, well, there's only 10% of the people who give you their email, right? 5 to 10%, depending on your conversion rate. And all the others, they're just bouncing, and you haven't changed their experience. They still have a pretty bad experience on your website. And so we thought about it, and we found an API, still from Clearbit, which is Reveal. And you send them an IP address, and it returns a domain, right? And this is just an extract of the data, but you get the same data on the company. You do not know the person, but you know the company, because all large companies, they have IPs that are known, right? And so the good thing is you can use the same scoring model. The scoring model you created on signup is still relevant here. So now you can predict the value of anonymous users. Now, what can you do when you can predict the value of anonymous users? I'll show you what you can do. The first thing you just can think about data analysis. How many of them have bounced and left your website? Are they valuable? If you have valuable companies that left your website, you're losing money. And we looked, and of course we had a ton. And the first thing we thought is, hey, we should email those people. I mean, they left the website, but they came, so we're interested. And in some cases, we saw companies that had 16 or 20 unique visitors from that company that bounced, right? And that's just, it just shows two things. One, they shared our link on Slack. Two, there's very high intent. Three, they left. Four, we want to talk to them, right? And so what we did is, we get the IP address, we get the domain, we apply the magic we do lead scoring. Those who have a high score, we then go to a third API to find which contacts can we have from that company. We know our ICP, or ideal customer. We know which roles we want to talk to, engineers, data engineers, VP of engineering. We ask up to 30 people from those profiles, those roles in those companies, and we email them, right? So we get about 1,500 new companies per week, of which 300 are the top score, of which 5,000 contacts we are able to email per week, all right? And this is cold email, but it's cold email that opens at 65%, all right? That's pretty darn good cold email. And we get about 16% response rates on that. So this is a, just to let you know, this is a multi-million dollar revenue source for Segment, right? Per year. So it's pretty significant. One thing here that you might see is in the email, we inject not only the technologies they use on their website, because we use another endpoint called Datanize that gives us the technologies company by company. So we can inject that in the email. And we match the relevant companies from the same industry. So we just pull the list of all Segment customers. We classify them by industry. And then because we know the industry from Clearbit for the company, we name their relevant, let's say, competitors or peers in the same industry, so that the email just makes more sense, right? If you are in retail, you want to hear how your tool is used by other companies doing retail, right? So that's good, but we're still forcing people to leave the website and get an email, and I don't like that. I want that to go faster and to be a better experience. And the way to do that is to use the same beginning of the pipeline, but instead of sending email, it's powering a live chat while they are still on the page. I still have a chance to save them while they are engaged, right? And so we force the chat for those people. And you could ask me, well, why don't you power chat for everyone? Well, because there's a cost. We talked about unit costs, and I tried live chat for 5 years, and I failed for 4 years. I mean, 4 consecutive years in 2 different jobs. It's a pretty long time to fail. And it's because salespeople were telling me, Guillaume, like, this live chat sucks. There's like just like 90% is bad leads, and we're just losing our time. We were just answering random questions. And they were right, but I didn't know how to solve it. In this case here, I'm actually powering the live chat only if I predict they are of high value. And now they are all battling to be on the chat because it's a huge revenue stream. So they all want to be there in Slack to answer the live chat that's on my website. Let's look at how it looks. It looks like this, and boom, I'm just making it bigger. And we inject the company name in the chat, but we also inject the technologies or the relevant companies. Just like in the email, we have access to the same data. It just forces us to have, I'd say, an infrastructure that moves a bit faster, but we can manipulate the chat, the JavaScript in the chat, and actually change the message before it appears. Right? And so now the chat is way more relevant. It talks about their volume, it talks about their company, and in some cases it just names their company. And you might wonder, well, does this work? Is this not too creepy? Well, a bit, but it works. They say, my email is, oh, hey, I'm curious, how do you know I'm from like a company name? And they say, sure, email me, right? Because they're intrigued. And they say, well, you kind of know who I am. Remember what I told you about my wife? We're creating a connection. We're showing that we care about them. It's in the name of a person, a seemingly person, and so they think, hey, there's someone I can talk to, someone who knows me already, right? This is another multi-million revenue source for Segment, right? The deal up here, this company, closed for a few $100,000 a year, right? So it's pretty impressive. So that's cool. By injecting relevant data in the chat window, we 5x'd the chat conversion rate. which is great. However, check out the difference between the page views and the chats. Unfortunately, still, most people don't engage on the chat. They still completely ignore it, even though we're 5xing it, right? We're just moving from like 2% to 10%, right? So we still have 90% of the people who have a pretty poor experience on our website, and that sucks, right? So how can we improve that? And I'm gonna show you something we did. So this is my 30-second technical spiel. I wanted to use the data we had to change the web page itself, the home page of Segment, before it loads. Now that creates a lot of technical challenges. Number one is speed, and number two is unique identities. And what we did is that we actually parallelized the enrichment on top of Nginx so that we could ping Clearbit, send that data to Matt Kudu, score it, and post it to Intelmize, who's the partner that does the web page modification, while the HTTP was being pulled, the HTTP layer was being pulled on the rest of the client. And which means that when the render starts, the JavaScript is ready with the variations, and it can change the page before it displays. So that's cool. Now the question is, what does it do? Let's see. So we have 3 pages from different companies. It's not landing pages, and it's not A/B tests. This is dynamic injection of data into our home page, and it changes the home page dynamically. It injects the technologies. If you see here, there's like Google Analytics, Mixpanel, Facebook Pixel. Those are dynamic. In the same way that we had them in the email and the chat, we can force a specific tile to display. In the same way that we were naming relevant companies, we can force a relevant logo to display. And so now the page itself is relevant. And we can even name the company here, collect of all of Atlassian's data, right? And so the home page itself becomes just like an email, right? It's a channel. So what did we change? We changed the hero message, the sign up, CTA. We removed the pricing link. A lot of people tell me, why do you remove the pricing link? Well, think about it. Segments pricing goes from like $99 to like a few $100,000 a year. Now, if you're like say Nike.com and you come to my website, do I want you to see that I'm selling like self-service pens at $99? No, I don't. That's gonna anchor you on like a very low pricing. I want you to see a site that's for B2B that says, contact us for a demo, like all my competitors do on the high end. But if you're a small company, I don't want you to talk to us because you need economics. So I don't want you to book a demo. I just want you to self-serve. And so I can optimize both paths when I can predict the value of the company. So, showtime. So this is all the changes we made from the CTA, the technologies. We reorder the tiles up and down. We inject the logos. And we even change the success story at the bottom. So the success story is industry-based. So everything changes. There's about 4.2 billion variations, 4.5 billion variations that are possible, combinations. If you make all the combinations, which means that there's basically one variation that for every 2 humans, more or less, which is pretty good. And I'd say the important thing is we don't need to create them, because it actually pulls the data dynamically from the source. Those are done automatically. So there's very little effort for us. We just need to say, hey, here's what element we want to change based on the industry or based on the technology, and it will change automatically. So that's the end of the experiments. And I want to close a bit with the vision. So you understood what I was trying to create, which is a better experience throughout the funnel. And the problem that I'm facing now is that I basically optimized all the steps in the funnel, and I'm stuck. I mean, I just like fired myself out of the job, right? Because like there's nothing left to optimize inside the funnel. And if you think at what ABM is, the top of ABM, it's acquisition, right? They are doing some research on companies that have not come to you yet, the salespeople, and they are trying to engage them. And I can't do that. I don't have the data, right? Before they come to my website, I don't have an IP address. I know nothing, right? So I thought about that, and before I fired myself out of a job, I said, well, maybe I have a solution. Maybe I can find the intent. Maybe I can find the moment where people are thinking about the problem, before they come to me, when they start doing some research on my technology, when they start feeling the pain, maybe I can know that data. And I looked around, and I did find some people who were selling that data, right? So if you go back to like the way it works for the simple method, we are just like taking the IP address, scoring it, prospecting to find some contacts and sending an email, right? Let's add a bit more sources. We can use companies like Datanyze to tell us the technology movement on a website. So for example, if a company signed up for a competitor 10 months ago, I know that the renewal is up in 2 months. I have Apptopia, which tells me the SDK data on mobile apps. So I can predict a few things. I can predict when they're going to release the new version of the app. How do I do that? It's very simple. I have all the history of the app versions. So say that you went from 2.6 to 2.7 to 2.8 to 2.9, and each time there's like a 1 month lag. I know your median time between subversion. So I know that in 1 month, you'll be at version 3. And I can contact the PM and say, hey, PM, if you want to succeed, you need to track data. We should talk, right? There's even companies like Bomboa that have like pixel agreements, and they know who's reading what, which company is reading what. So when topics surge, right, they can tell you there's like 20 people reading about that topic within Algolia. Now you know that there's intent. And there's more and more and more of those data. So that's great, but you don't have to stop at just sending an email or doing chat. You can go even further. You collect all the data, and you can send physical goods. You can do dynamic advertising. And so if you look at the system from all perspectives, what we are creating, and that's the vision, is we are collecting all the movement, all the intent data on all companies in the US. We are storing it, we are applying machine learning, and then we are predicting who should we talk to within which company about what topic at what time, and then we find the best channel to send them an email, to send them a chat, to send them a dynamic web content, advertising, and so on and so on and so on. So we've completely replaced salespeople from the bottom to the end. From the user's perspective, however, it's a bit different. They don't see that. What they see is progressive, let's say, profiling. What they do is that they first change the web tech, maybe they hire someone, we know that. They read about something, we know that also. They come to our website, and each time we will, because we know the intent, because we're able to spend a bit more, the more the intent progresses, we are able to add a bit of marketing and go to the next channel, which is a bit more expensive. So that's about it. So now we cover all phases from the intent to the conversion. And thank you very much.
Sounds amazing, like everything you did. I was just curious, so it sounds also like a lot of work, engineering-wise especially. How do you decide where to start? Like, what was most important?
So this took about 1.5 years, the 4 experiments you saw with like other stuff. The team, it's one guy who's half engineer, half PM, one guy who's half sales, half marketer, and myself. That's it. So it's some work, but it's not that much, right? We prioritize starting by what's simplest, where we have the data. So we started with like post sign up because everyone has some kind of a sign up. We just ping Clearbit, got the data back, and enrich the email. This is like 1 week's worth of work, and you get like plus 30% activation. Totally worth it. And then we just move to the next biggest challenge in your funnel. And so for that to work, you need to know where your funnel leaks, so you need to measure your funnel.
What kind of companies can you find on Clearbit, and is there a limit to the information you can retrieve from a user?
Yes, so Clearbit has a very good coverage on US companies. So if you're thinking of email to company and personal profile, it depends a lot on your traffic. If it's a business email, the coverage is north of 90%. And the false positives are below 6%. False positives are very important. If you're looking at IP, the IP to company is around 30%, which is much lower, and the false positives are around 10%, which is much higher, right? Now, on the company, on the person, you will find about 100 different traits, attributes on each of those profiles, which is extremely rich. but the more you go into like special attributes, the less coverage you're going to get. All right, so for example, on companies, you're going to get like some metrics like as the revenue, the company size, how much they raised, the technologies that they have. They're going to do tagging based on what the website, you know, if it's a SaaS company, not a SaaS company. One thing I could say is the coverage increases as the company size increases. So if you look at companies that have more than 1,000 employees, the coverage is almost 1,000. It's almost 100%. All right, it gets tricky for small companies.
For all of your requests, so you're talking to a lot of different APIs. Some of them are maybe free and some are costing. How's the kind of cost structure there for every request?
Yeah, so I can give you two answers, both of which are true. One is it can be pretty costly. It's usually, so for example, for Clearbit, their IP API, it's a few cents per request, which can go pretty fast. And it's a bit lower for the email one. And if you add MadKudu and if you add all of the rest of the enrichment layer, all of the tools, we're talking of a few euros, a few dollars per contact, right? Which is pretty expensive. Now, if you look at the other perspective, if you look at how much revenue we're doing and the return on investments, we cover the cost of those tools by about noon on the first day of the month. So that's like 1/60th, which is like, it's pretty good, right? And like, so we make a lot of money based on it. We do spend a lot of money, right? But we spend like a few $100,000, but we make a few millions. So yeah, all in all, it's about 60 times the return on investment.
You mentioned, like when you talked about the dynamic web content, you mentioned speed as a trade-off. How much slower is it?
So we give ourselves 500 milliseconds to change the website before we default to the default variation. So we are ready to accept up to 0.5 seconds of impact, which has an impact on the user experience, not on the SEO because Google is excluded from it, but it does have a slight impact on the user experience. But I mean, 0.5 seconds is not nothing, right? If you think of your website, which is like 3 seconds, we're talking of like a pretty significant impact. On the other hand, the experience is much better. So, but that's where we set the limits. It's also because we were unable to bring it lower. At 500 milliseconds, we are able to do the enrichment and the scoring and serve back the variation for 80% of the traffic that is revealed. So that's why we put the limit. We want it to cover at least 80% of the cases and to impact as low as possible. Thank you. Your life on me.